You decluttered your entire closet last spring. Bags of clothes went to donation. You felt lighter, clearer, more intentional about what remained. For about 3 weeks, opening your closet brought genuine satisfaction. Finally, you were living with less. Finally, you had it figured out. Then summer arrived, and you realized you donated your only pair of shorts that actually fit. Fall came, and you couldn't find the jacket you'd worn every October for 5 years. Gone. Sacrificed to the minimalism gods during your decluttering frenzy. Winter hit, and you found yourself rebuying items nearly identical to things you'd given away months earlier. You followed the rules. You did everything the minimalism content told you to do. Somehow, you ended up with less money, more frustration, and a creeping suspicion that this whole minimalism thing might be designed for people whose lives look nothing like yours. Here's what nobody tells you about minimalist advice. Much of it was created by single people in temperate climates with flexible jobs and no children. The rules that work for a 28-year-old content creator in Los Angeles don't necessarily work for a family of 4 in Minnesota. The systems designed for someone who works from home don't translate to someone with a commute, a dress code, and hobbies that require equipment. The problem isn't minimalism itself. The core idea of being intentional about possessions genuinely improves life. The problem is that popular minimalist rules have become rigid dogma, applied universally to situations they were never designed for. This video breaks down 10 minimalist rules that consistently backfire, along with what actually works instead. If you've tried minimalism and felt like you were failing at it, you weren't failing. You were following advice that doesn't account for how real people actually live. The first rule that doesn't work: if you haven't used it in 6 months, get rid of it. This is probably the most repeated minimalism advice in existence, and it causes more regret and rebuying than any other rule. The logic seems sound. If something hasn't been touched in 6 months, you clearly don't need it. But this time frame ignores entire categories of legitimately useful possessions. Seasonal items. You don't use your winter coat in July or your swimsuit in January. 6 months of non-use means nothing for items tied to seasons. Occasion-specific items. The suit you wear to weddings and funerals. The formal dress for annual events. The camping gear for your yearly trip. These might sit unused for 8 or 10 months and still be essential when their occasion arrives. Emergency supplies. First aid kits, backup batteries, jumper cables, tools for home repairs. You might not touch these for years, and then suddenly they're the most important things you own. Life stage items. Maternity clothes. Baby equipment waiting for a second child. Professional attire from a career you might return to. 6 months of unemployment doesn't mean you'll never work in that field again. The rebuying problem is real. I've watched people donate winter boots in August only to buy new winter boots in November. The original boots were fine, perfectly broken in, comfortable, years of life left. The new boots cost money, required breaking in, and weren't as good as what was discarded. What works instead? Evaluate items based on their purpose and realistic future use rather than arbitrary timeframes. Ask yourself, when would I realistically need this? Is that scenario likely? Could I easily replace this if the scenario arose? For genuinely unnecessary items, 6 months might be too long a grace period. For seasonal or occasional items, 6 months is absurdly short. Match your evaluation time frame to the actual nature of the item. The second rule that doesn't work: your wardrobe should contain exactly 33 items. The capsule wardrobe movement popularized specific numbers: 33 items, 25 items, some number that sounds impressively small and fits nicely into a headline. These numbers are completely arbitrary. They weren't derived from research on optimal wardrobe size. They were invented by individuals describing their personal preferences, then repeated until they became rules. A 33-piece wardrobe might work perfectly for someone who lives in San Diego, works remotely, and rarely attends formal events. The same wardrobe would be absurdly inadequate for someone in Chicago who commutes to a corporate office, attends their kids' sporting events, exercises regularly, and experiences 4 distinct seasons. Different lives require different amounts of clothing. A nurse needs different footwear than an accountant. A frequent traveler needs different quantities than someone who rarely leaves their city. Someone rebuilding their wardrobe after weight change needs different considerations than someone whose size has been stable for decades. The number also ignores the distinction between minimizing items and minimizing decisions. A larger wardrobe of versatile, interchangeable pieces might actually produce fewer decisions than a tiny capsule requiring constant outfit engineering. What works instead? Focus on eliminating what you genuinely don't wear rather than hitting an arbitrary number. Keep items that fit well, make you feel good, and serve actual occasions in your actual life. If your functional wardrobe contains 50 items, that's fine. If it contains 80 items because you have hobbies, seasonal needs, and professional requirements that demand variety, that's also fine. The goal is intentionality about what you own, not competitive minimizing. The third rule that doesn't work: buy experiences instead of things. This advice has become almost religious doctrine. Experiences are good, things are bad, and anyone who spends money on physical possessions is missing the point of life. The dichotomy is false. Experiences and things aren't opposing categories. They're deeply intertwined. Things enable experiences. A bicycle enables the experience of riding through your neighborhood. A tent enables the experience of camping with friends. A good kitchen knife enables the experience of cooking meals you're proud of. Musical instruments, art supplies, sports equipment, books, these are things that create experiences. Some experiences require extensive things. Photography, woodworking, gardening, rock climbing, these pursuits demand equipment. Telling someone to stop buying things and start buying experiences ignores that their experiences require things. And some things are experiences. A beautiful piece of art you see every day is an ongoing experience. A comfortable chair you sit in while reading creates thousands of small experiences over its lifetime. Things you interact with regularly aren't opposed to experiences, they're containers for them. The advice also ignores financial reality. A week-long vacation might cost more than a piece of furniture that brings daily satisfaction for a decade. Spending $300 on a dinner creates one evening of experience. The same $300 on a quality item you use daily might create 10 years of experience. What works instead? Evaluate purchases based on the ongoing value they'll add to your life rather than categorizing them as thing versus experience. How often will you engage with this? How much satisfaction will each engagement provide? Does this enable activities that matter to you? A kayak is technically a thing. It's also the vessel for years of experiences on the water. Reject the false dichotomy and think in terms of value created over time. The fourth rule that doesn't work: one in, one out with no exceptions. The one in, one out rule states that for every new item entering your home, one equivalent item must leave. Buy a new shirt, donate an old shirt. Acquire a new kitchen gadget, remove an existing one. This rule makes sense as a general principle for preventing accumulation. As a rigid law applied without exception, it falls apart. Sometimes you genuinely need more of something. If you've been making do with 2 bath towels and buy 2 more, you don't need to throw away your existing towels to make room. You actually need 4 towels. That's why you bought more. Life circumstances change in ways that require additional items. New hobbies, new jobs, new family members, moves to different climates. These situations legitimately require acquiring things without corresponding removal. The rule can prevent upgrading strategically. If you own 1 mediocre pan and buy 1 quality pan, removing the mediocre pan makes sense. But if you own 3 mediocre pans and buy 1 quality pan that could replace 2 of them, the one in, one out math doesn't capture the actual improvement happening. It also creates strange incentives. People following this rule rigidly sometimes throw away perfectly good items just to create permission to acquire something new. The environmental and financial waste of this approach undermines the whole point of mindful consumption. What works instead? Apply the one in, one out principle flexibly as a check against mindless accumulation rather than a rigid law. Before acquiring something new, ask whether you have space for it physically and mentally. Ask whether something existing could leave to make room. But don't force removals that don't make sense just to satisfy a formula. The goal is thoughtful curation of your possessions over time, not strict mathematical compliance with arbitrary rules. The fifth rule that doesn't work: keep only what sparks joy. Marie Kondo's spark joy concept resonated with millions because it introduced emotional consideration into decluttering decisions. The problem comes when spark joy becomes the only criterion. Utility matters too. Your toilet brush doesn't spark joy. Neither does your plunger, your tax documents, your first aid kit, or your snow shovel. These items exist because they serve necessary functions, rather than because handling them produces delight. The spark joy test works beautifully for discretionary items. Clothes you wear by choice, decorations, books, personal items. It fails completely for functional necessities. It also fails for things you haven't connected with yet. New items rarely spark the same joy as items you've built history with. A book you haven't read doesn't spark the joy of a book you loved. A tool you haven't mastered doesn't spark the joy of a tool that's become an extension of your hand. Spark joy as a test would eliminate anything new. And joy itself is complicated. Some items don't spark joy in the moment, but enable future joy. Workout equipment might not spark joy at 6 a.m., but it enables the joy of fitness and health. Art supplies might not spark joy while sitting unused, but they spark joy when creative inspiration strikes. What works instead? Evaluate items on multiple dimensions. Does it spark joy? Is it useful? Is it necessary? Does it enable activities I value? Would I miss it if it were gone? An item can stay if it satisfies any of these criteria meaningfully. It should go only if it fails all of them. The spark joy test is one valuable question among several, not the only question that matters. The sixth rule that doesn't work: declutter everything in one massive weekend purge. Minimalism content loves the dramatic transformation, the before and after of a single weekend that converts chaos into calm. The packing party, the complete closet overhaul, the whole house declutter accomplished in 48 hours. These dramatic purges make great content. They make terrible strategy. Rushed decisions produce regret. When you're in declutter mode, riding the dopamine hit of filling donation bags, you make decisions you wouldn't make in a calmer state. Items get removed not because they should go, but because the momentum of purging sweeps them along. The rebuying problem is worst after big purges. Nearly everyone who does a dramatic whole house declutter ends up rebuying things they removed. The money wasted on replacement often exceeds what a more thoughtful approach would have cost. Big purges don't build habits. A weekend transformation is an event, not a practice. When it's over, you haven't learned anything sustainable. New items accumulate, and a year later, you need another dramatic purge because the underlying patterns haven't changed. They're also exhausting in ways that create negative associations. When decluttering feels like a grueling marathon, you avoid doing it. The task becomes something you dread rather than a routine maintenance activity. What works instead? Declutter in small, regular sessions rather than dramatic events. 15 minutes weekly produces better results than 8 hours once a year. Start with easy areas: that junk drawer, the bathroom cabinet, a single shelf. Build the habit of examining possessions thoughtfully. Over months, the small sessions add up to comprehensive decluttering without the mistakes of rushed decisions. This approach also catches accumulation early. Instead of letting things pile up until they require dramatic intervention, you're continuously curating in real time. The seventh rule that doesn't work: minimalists must embrace an all-white aesthetic. Open any minimalism blog or Instagram account, and you'll see the same visual language: white walls, white furniture, natural wood, empty surfaces, plants carefully placed as the only organic element. This aesthetic has become so associated with minimalism that people think adopting the lifestyle requires adopting the look. This confuses aesthetic minimalism with practical minimalism. They're related but separate concepts, and conflating them creates problems. All white spaces require constant maintenance. White shows every mark, stain, and speck of dust. Keeping the minimalist aesthetic pristine is itself a time-consuming, unminimalist task. Many people who adopt this look end up spending more time cleaning than they did before. The aesthetic actively conflicts with some lives. Families with young children cannot maintain white surfaces. People with messy hobbies cannot maintain empty workspaces. Pet owners cannot maintain pristine floors. The lifestyle itself prevents the aesthetic from working. It can also feel cold and unwelcoming. Homes need personality to feel like homes. Removing all color, all texture, all visual interest in pursuit of minimalist aesthetics can create spaces that look beautiful in photos but feel sterile to inhabit. What works instead? Separate the question of how much you own from the question of how your space looks. You can own relatively few things while still having color, texture, pattern, and personality in your home. You can practice minimalism in a maximalist decorated space. Focus on whether your possessions serve you functionally and emotionally rather than whether your space photographs well. The goal is a life that works for you, not a life that impresses strangers on the internet. The 8th rule that doesn't work. Minimalism means never buying anything on sale. This advice comes from a reasonable place. Sales manipulate us into buying things we don't need just because the price is reduced. But the pendulum has swung too far into an absolute prohibition that ignores reality. Sales on things you genuinely need save money. If you need new running shoes and find quality running shoes at 30% off, you're not being manipulated, you're being strategic. Waiting for sales on planned purchases is good financial management, not anti-minimalist behavior. Bulk buying on sale reduces trips, packaging, and cost per use. Stocking up on household essentials when prices drop is more sustainable and more affordable than buying small quantities at full price repeatedly. The never buy on sale rule can actually backfire into paying more. If you need something and refuse to buy it on sale because sales are manipulative, you end up paying full price for the same item. The logic defeats itself. The issue isn't sales. It's unplanned purchasing triggered by sales. Buying things you don't need because they're discounted is problematic. Buying things you do need at the best available price is rational. What works instead? Distinguish between need-driven purchases that happen to be on sale and sale-driven purchases that create artificial need. The first category is smart shopping. The second is what minimalism should help you avoid. Before any sale purchase, ask, would I buy this at full price if I needed it? If the answer is yes, buying it on sale is a win. If the answer is no, the sale is creating desire rather than satisfying existing need. The 9th rule that doesn't work. You should be able to move with just a few boxes. Minimalist content romanticizes extreme portability, the ability to fit your entire life into a backpack, a few suitcases, or a small moving van. This flexibility is presented as the ultimate goal, proof of successful minimalism. For most people, this goal makes no sense. If you're not planning to move frequently, optimizing for moving is absurd. Owning furniture that serves you well in a home you'll stay in for years makes more sense than owning minimal furniture so that moving would be easier if you hypothetically moved. Roots have value. The art on your walls, the kitchen equipment you've accumulated, the comfortable home you've built. These create quality of life daily. Sacrificing daily quality for theoretical future portability is a bad trade for anyone who isn't actually planning to be nomadic. The advice also ignores different life stages. A 25-year-old who might relocate for career opportunities has different considerations than a 45-year-old with established community, children in school, and career stability. Optimizing for portability makes sense for the first person. It makes no sense for the second. And genuine portability requires significant income. The people who travel with just a backpack rely on being able to buy or rent what they need wherever they go. That lifestyle requires financial resources that most minimalism content doesn't acknowledge. What works instead? Match your possessions to your actual life circumstances rather than an idealized nomadic fantasy. If you're settled, own the things that make settled life good. If you're genuinely mobile or planning to become mobile, optimize for that reality. The question isn't, could I move easily, but Am I living well in my actual current situation? The 10th rule that doesn't work. Minimalism is about owning as little as possible. This misunderstanding underlies most of the other failed rules. Somewhere along the way, minimalism became a competition to own the least, a race to the bottom where success means maximum deprivation. This competitive minimalism misses the entire point. The goal was never fewer things. The goal was better life. Minimalism arose as a response to consumerism that made people stressed, cluttered, and constantly wanting more. The intention was removing what detracts from well-being so that what remains serves you better. But obsessing over owning less can create its own stress. Constantly evaluating possessions, feeling guilty about items that don't meet arbitrary minimalist standards, rebuying things you eliminated too hastily, these experiences degrade quality of life rather than improving it. The optimal number of possessions varies enormously between individuals. A professional musician might need dozens of items related to their craft. A person with multiple hobbies needs equipment for those hobbies. A family with children needs vastly more than a single adult. None of these people are failing at minimalism. They're living lives that require more things. Forced scarcity isn't freedom. Freedom is having what you need without being overwhelmed by excess. For some people, that means very few possessions. For others, it means quite a lot. The number itself doesn't determine success. What works instead? Reframe minimalism as sufficiency rather than scarcity. The question isn't, how little can I own? But, do I have what I need without being burdened by excess? This framing allows for individual variation. It acknowledges that different lives require different resources. It focuses on the purpose of minimalism, a life that works well, rather than fetishizing the method of owning less. These 10 rules fail because they prioritize ideology over practicality. Real minimalism isn't a set of rigid rules to follow. It's a framework for asking better questions about your possessions and consumption. Questions like, does this serve me? Does it add value? Would I notice if it were gone? Am I keeping this out of guilt or obligation rather than genuine usefulness? The answers to these questions vary by person, by season, by life stage, by circumstance. Rigid rules can't capture that variation. Only thoughtful individual evaluation can. Here's what actually works. A mindset of continuous, gentle curation rather than dramatic intervention. Regular, small evaluations rather than annual purges. Flexibility to adapt as your life changes. Permission to own what you need without guilt or justification. This approach doesn't make good content. It doesn't produce dramatic before and after photos. You can't summarize it in a catchy rule, but it actually improves life, which is supposed to be the point. The people I know who successfully simplified their lives didn't follow rules religiously. They developed judgment about what serves them and what doesn't. They learned to recognize the difference between genuinely useful possessions and accumulation that creates burden. That judgment can't be reduced to a formula like 6 months or 33 items. Keeping track of everything you own and whether each item serves you is genuinely difficult. These simplistic rules attempt to shortcut that difficulty, but shortcuts that produce regret aren't actually shortcuts. The slower path of developing real discernment saves more time in the end by eliminating the cycle of purging and rebuying. Everything in this video is financial literacy applied to physical possessions. The connection might not be obvious, but how you manage stuff and how you manage money are deeply related. Both require distinguishing between genuine needs and manufactured wants. Both require understanding true cost, not just purchase price, but ongoing costs of ownership. Both benefit from systems that make good decisions automatic rather than requiring constant willpower. The person who understands cost per use when evaluating purchases makes better decisions about both keeping and acquiring. The person who can resist artificial urgency from sales does better with both decluttering pressure and spending pressure. The person who evaluates possessions based on how they serve actual life applies the same thinking to financial decisions. I made a complete breakdown of financial literacy that covers these connections: how to think clearly about what serves you, how to avoid manipulation by marketing and trends, how to build systems that support good decisions automatically. If this video helped you recognize minimalist rules that were working against you rather than for you, that video will give you the complete framework for aligning your money and your possessions with the life you actually want. Because here's what minimalism and money have in common. Both are tools in service of good living. Neither is the goal itself. The person who hoards possessions and the person who competes to own nothing are both missing the point. The person who obsesses over savings rates and the person who never thinks about money are both making errors. The goal is enough. Enough money, enough stuff, enough security, without letting the pursuit of more consume the life it was supposed to enable. Most people who try minimalism eventually abandon it because the rules feel impossible. They conclude that minimalism isn't for them. What they don't realize is that the rules were the problem, not the underlying concept. Intentionality about possessions genuinely improves life. Rigid rules that ignore individual circumstances do the opposite. You don't have to follow rules that weren't designed for your life. You can take what works about minimalism, the thoughtfulness, the intentionality, the focus on what actually matters, and leave the arbitrary restrictions that create more problems than they solve. Your possessions should serve your life. Any minimalist rule that makes your life harder is failing at the only test that matters. Now you know which rules to ignore. What you do with that freedom is up to you.